And I'm just very curious about your opinion on that. And does that affect the way you think about Black business today?
That is a great question. And by the way, Dr. King is a very big hero of mine. Even though he wasn't a Pan-Africanist, he's still a hero because he gave us our last significant movement for social change in this country. There's been no Black leader since King, if you think about it, that has done anything of significance to try to transform the reality for Black folks. He's the last one. And it's been almost 50 years. In addition to that, Dr. King was born into a very well-to-do family. He could have easily fallen back and became a megachurch minister. He had the oratory, he had the education, and instead he chose to fight for the people and ultimately give his life. And so for that, he'll always be one of my greats. Normally when I come to Atlanta, I haven't had a time this time, but normally when I come to Atlanta, I'll go to the Dr. King Shrine and just sit there and meditate for a little bit. So I want to say that. The other thing I want to say, heading towards the answer to your question, is we have to recognize that the Civil Rights Bill of 64 does not fall under human rights law. It falls under antitrust law because the Civil Rights Bill was not about justice. It was about opening up the Black market to exploitation by American capitalists. They wanted to liberate the Black dollar for white exploitation because the segregated Black dollar, by consequence, empowered Black people to a point that we became a financial threat to America. So if you look at Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Rosewood, Wilmington, because we were not allowed to participate in mainstream society, we had to keep our money to ourselves. And as you know, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly.
Since I can't shop with the whites, I have to build my own. I can't sleep at their hotel. I have to create my own. So the American social order didn't realize by not allowing Black people to participate, you're number one, forcing them to create their own reality. And number two, you're helping them keep their money to themselves. So from a financial perspective, segregation benefited Black people more than the power structure. Socially, though, it benefited the power structure more. Because when we would venture out of our Black community, now you're in enemy territory. You could get lynched. You could get arrested. You could get shot for being in the wrong place. So Dr. King, they had to fight and tear down the walls of segregation. But that economic benefit that segregation afforded to us, we lost it and we've never gotten it back. Now, in defense of Dr. King, because you hear a lot of people blame him and they say Dr. King is the reason we don't have anything of our own because he made us segregate. First of all, the United States government never integrated anybody by force. Let me say this again. No one was ever integrated by force. They only desegregated. That means we're going to remove the legal barrier of access. You see that?
Yes.
To integrate, I'm going to guarantee your participation. The government has never guaranteed our participation. Desegregation, there's nothing on paper keeping you out. You see the difference?
Yes.
There's a big difference there. So the government never integrated, it only desegregated. And the reason Dr. King cannot be made the scapegoat or the fall guy for why we have lost our economic power is because, number one, Dr. King was only fighting for access to opportunity and resources. Dr. King never told Black people to give up your Black communities. He never told Black people to give up your Black schools. He never told Black people to give up your hospitals, your supermarkets, and so forth. We gave them up because we wanted access to the white society. We wanted proximity to whiteness, and we still do and don't like to admit it, right? So Dr. King was only saying, I'm tearing this down. So if we do need to send one of our students to Harvard to get a particular education because the HBCU doesn't offer it, we can. See that? If I need you to go get training for a particular area and no HBCU is offering it, you should be able to. It was about access to the opportunity and the resource. It wasn't about completely abdicating and giving up your own community and running to be with the whites. And if you listen to Dr. King's message, particularly during the last 2 years of his life, he's very clear about protecting Black institutions. And he's already dead by the time desegregation gets implemented. Remember, first you get the law, and then it takes a couple years for them to give you the policy that supports the law.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. King is dead before the implementation of the Civil Rights Bill anyway. So the reason we gave up our schools, our banks, our hospitals, our supermarkets isn't because of Dr. King. It's because we always wanted acceptance by Caucasians. In other words, we don't solve the economic devastation of Black America if you don't deal with the psychological dependency we have on white people's approval. They go hand in hand. Now, the gains. Why was Dr. King assassinated? Dr. King was assassinated on April the 4th, 1968 at the Divine Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, because Dr. King's next movement was a movement for economic justice and the redistribution of wealth. Dr. King was about to lead a breadbasket campaign. He was going to take poor Americans of every race to the front of the White House lawn. They was going to erect a tent city throughout D.C. Nobody was leaving unless they left with a job and a home. It was revolution. He would have embarrassed the United States government. They couldn't allow it. That's why he was murdered. He was not murdered for integration. He was murdered for economic empowerment. Remember, there's only 2 Black leaders you had who were more popular than the president of the United States, who was in office at the time they lived, Frederick Douglass. More popular than Lincoln and Dr. King. More popular than JFK and Lyndon Baines Johnson. They had to kill him because he was too globally valid. That had he went to DC and had he been given an opportunity to initiate that economic justice campaign, America may have been forced to restructure the way society operates.
And my question, why hasn't that been done then since? Because
you got to be willing to die if you're going to change a system, especially for the benefit of Black people. And Dr. King is the last significant leader we had who was willing to give his life for that transformation. Now, you had the Black Panthers and you had the Black Liberation Army. They were willing to die too, and many of them did, right?
Right.
They were younger, more radical. Dr. King was a little bit more acceptable because he was more diplomatic. They were uncompromising. Make no mistake, if I have a choice between the Panthers and Dr. King, I would have ended up with the Panthers as well. You follow me?
Yeah.
I would have ended up in the BLA as well. But we needed them both.
Right.
But to your point, you don't have uncompromising leadership because Black America doesn't create it. A big difference between us and every other community in this country, they make their leaders. We pray for ours. Asians, they train them. Caucasians, they train them. Jews, they train them. Arabs, they train them. Black people, we go to church, mosque, get on our hands and knees and ask God to send us another leader. To that point, a big mistake we make as a race is we try to solve our political and economic problems with religious philosophy, and it hasn't served us well. The reason we pray for our leaders